get started here. No akitare tatasati tatachikstariku, Hixj, Jasha Lyons Echo-Hawk, Jaha Jeffidos. Hello everyone, my name is Jasha Lyons Echo-Hawk, and I'm the training coordinator for Indigenous Peoples Power Project, known as IP3. And I'd like to welcome you all to SKODOODISDEN Virtual Action Camp. Again, this is day 3, and I think session 3, the food sovereignty session. So appreciate those of you who have been attending all the sessions or checking in a session here or there. Really excited for this week. Just briefly about our organization, Indigenous Peoples Power Project, or IP3, works collaboratively with Indigenous communities, organizations, and tribal governments on the ground to build capacity, community, and connections in Indian country to support Indigenous resistance. We provide training in nonviolent direct action, or NVDA. We organize action camps such as this one. We also assist in community action requests, like the one that came from Standing Rock. We provided the NVDA training there. And we also assist in movement building in an effort to sustain Indigenous traditional ways of life and protection of the homelands. And this particular action camp we're doing right now is virtual in light of the pandemic. We do hope to have our in-person action camp later on this year, provided the pandemic, we're able to come through that in a good, and safe way. But I want to take the time right now to offer a moment of gratitude, reflection, reverence, or prayer before I introduce our speakers. So if you could bear with us. We come to you, creators, today to offer thanks for this beautiful day that's upon us. We ask that you watch over each and every one of us and our families and our extensions, into the community. We also ask that you let us think beyond ourselves so that we can clearly see the impact that we have on each other, on each day, and that we remember to live with purpose and to learn to walk in balance and care with Earth and ourselves and the animal nation. We also ask for comfort for those that are in mourning, as we are in this time of pandemic and this time of somewhat collective grief, and those of us are going through many things and hardship alike. And we also just, again, appreciate everything. And with that, Noah Edie, Mado, thank you. I do want to mention that we have been offering a gift bag giveaway at each session of our action camp, and so we will pull a name from those who are attending. One gift bag will go to one of you. If you bear with us, we'll announce that name at the end of the session, and then those within Zoom and or Facebook, please use the chat or comment section for any questions. We ask that if you could please introduce yourself, you'd list your pronouns, tribal affiliations, and if you could tell us where you're from to get us started so that we can become acquainted with each other. And so I will now introduce our speakers here, some relatives that I've come to know throughout these years, and just really excited to have you all here with us. So our first speaker presenter is Olivia Moore. They of Pawnee Nation is a two-spirit community organizer committed to restoring a balanced relationship with the earth. As the co-founder of Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, they support the revitalization of Indigenous foods and healing systems, including the development of the Wabanaki Community Apothecary, Rematriation School, and Indigenous birthwork reclamation. She organizes with Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance and serves on the board of the Wabanaki Reach. Olivia is dedicated to child welfare system abolition and fosters Native children. Our second speaker is Electa Hare-RedCorn, who is an MSW and is an enrolled member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma and of Inhanktowan Dakota descendancy. I hope I said that right. She resides in Pawhuska, Oklahoma with her partner and 3 children. Mrs. Hare-RedCorn's strengths include policy analysis and youth-led programming and leadership development for agricultural and rural children, youth, and families. She serves on the Eastern Oklahoma region of the Intertribal Agriculture Council as technical assistance specialist In this role, she provides technical assistance for USDA, natural resource conservation services, and agricultural development projects. Electa is a seed keeper for the Pawnee Seed Preservation Society under PSPS founders Deb Echo-Hawk and Ronnie O'Brien. Her passion is in assisting with homeland, mentorships, food sovereignty, and citizen science efforts. Sorry, I lost your bio.
Oh, that was good.
Finish.
That was good.
Yeah, I was like, that's not it. But yeah, just a little bit further. But yeah, I'll let them go ahead and expand on yeah, who they are, what they do, and we'll kick it over to Olivia.
Right. Thank you. I just want to acknowledge the like strange, dramatic, like half-face lighting that I have going this evening. Lit up by the lights inside my vehicle, sitting on top a hill in a blueberry barren, so that I can get enough reception where I live to join you all this evening. So I'm Olivia Moore. I'm a member of the Penobscot Nation. We are, our traditional territory is a significant portion of so-called Maine, and the Penobscot Nation is also a part of the Wabanaki Confederacy, and so you'll hear me perhaps refer to Wabanaki or some of our programs, Wabanaki, engaging all of the nations of Wabanaki. So Penobscot Nation is one of five, with also the Passamaquoddy, the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Abenaki nations as well. So that's a little bit about where I'm situated. I am in my home territory, in the coastal part of our territory here. All right, let me just kind of get centered a little bit. Yeah, I feel really honored to be joining this space and this conversation, and I really look forward to, I hope we'll have a few minutes at the end. I'd love to hear from others who are with us this evening. So I support and help organize a collective of Indigenous food and medicine producers here in the so-called Northeast United States, Eastern Woodlands Rematriation Collective. We're really intentional to engage in processes of collective leadership within our organization. Though we are led exclusively by Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks, our membership is our broad kin networks, right? We need all of our relatives and family to be a part of this work. And a really important piece of the framing of the work towards food sovereignty for us in Eastern Woodlands Rematriation is the process of rematriating to and with our food systems. And we really understand that our relationship to our food system is a pathway to restoring balanced relationship with the earth and one another, and how balanced relationship with the earth is really transformative for all of our other systems of organization, right? So achieving food sovereignty as Indigenous people will, we believe through this lens of rematriation, support the restoration of balanced economic systems, political structures, and social structures. So again, our food system, our relationship to the earth is this place of transformation for all of the ways that we are, right, and that we relate. And so to rematriate is to restore matriarchies. Here in the Northeast, our traditional ways of organizing were matriarchal, and we understand to support matriarchy as a shift in the source of power, and that rather than power being exerted over others, or to exploit or control or limit any other being, we understand in the framework of rematriating as power as a source from within each of us. And from that shift of place of power, that power is then not, again, exploitative or harmful, but that it is beautiful and it is self-actualizing and it is in service of others. And so really supporting, working through both the intellectual and political articulation and understanding of what that shared future can look like, but of rematriating and shifting the source of power back to honoring the gifts that we all hold. But again, really think about what does that look like in our relationship to the earth and to how we feed and nurture our families and our communities. And it's really about reclaiming those relationships with the earth, with the waterways, with our foods and plant relatives and medicines. Okay, let me just slow down because my mind's going all kinds of different places. So yes, so really centering our work, not only, so the collective, we both support existing projects that are occurring in tribal communities throughout all of the Northeast United States, but we do also initiate our own projects such as the Wabanaki Community Apothecary and the Rematriation School, which we're in the process of doing some more fundraising around so we can get more of the funds and energy to get that going. But so, and also again, supportive of existing projects. All of these projects are led by folks in their own tribal communities, or in also Indigenous folks who are in diaspora. We have a very unique context here in the Northeast in terms of the process of genocide and colonization. And so for Wabanaki tribes up here in Maine, we do have some of our land, some bits of our land base, right? My reservation is an island in the middle of a river in the middle of the state, and the widest point across is a half mile, and there's about 500 of us on our at our tribal center now, right? So we do have a reservation, incredibly tiny, and then there's a lot of other tribes here in the Northeast that don't have any land base, don't have a reservation, or their reservation is so tiny that there cannot be, the community is not living in that space. So we're really intentional about engaging with our relatives who are off reservation, right, or not living in tribal community, again, because of this pretty specific experience of colonization here in the Northeast. What else? So yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of incredible things. We really understand how, yes, we're supporting Indigenous farmers. Agriculture is absolutely a piece of food systems for, so my nation, Penobscot Nation, is a piece of our food systems. But for us to really restore the full range of our relationships with the earth, we're fisher people, fresh water, salt water, we're fish people, and so we're absolutely supporting Indigenous farmers and supporting of land access and the technical skills and labor exchange trade together, and putting up the greenhouses and doing all of that collective work together around agriculture, but also recognizing to really restore Indigenous food systems. It's our so-called agroforestry, right? Our food forest, restoring, reclaiming those. It's our fisheries, it's our hunting and our trapping, and of course our plant medicines. So really understanding the full breadth and all the different parts of our traditional territory that we need to be able to have relationship with, and that those parts of our territory need us as well, right, to return as caretakers and supporting a humble human interaction with that place, right, one that really listens and allows that place to show us. So okay, I'll pause there. because that was only one question. There's more, and there'll be more opportunity for so yes, thank you, and I will pass it to Electa.
Thank you, Olivia. I really appreciate that. I feel energized, inspired, and encouraged in the work that we have begun with our Pawnee Seed Preservation Society. So I will introduce myself, Noah Dadasa Baruskatari Da'u. Hello, my name is Electa Hare-RedCorn. I'm a member of the Pitahawidata Band of the Pawnee Nation. My lineage runs back into the Chowie Band as well of the Pawnee Nation. My great-great-grandfather, his name was Lukita Wikawari, he who rides his horse around in the lodge. But in our Pawnee cosmology, or our relation to the natural world around us and supernatural world, we understand that lodge at that time meant the open prairie, all the waters, the sky, the blue vastness of the sky, and on into the stars. And so it's funny, I'm calling from Arizona today, but I live in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. It's in the Osage Nation capital, and it is an hour from the Pawnee Seed Preservation Society home base, where our burgeoning seed bank is. And I don't mean to ramble, but literally learning about my relative and my descendant here just yesterday, and more about his name and what it means and where it came from. It gives me passion and interest in learning more about our language, and our language particularly as it ties to food sovereignty, and using that as a tool of resistance. I say that, and I visited with Jasha prior to the call, and she had mentioned acts of resistance, nonviolent resistance. And I think that reclaiming our language and rematriation definitely align with that mindset and those actions. So I'm appreciative to be here today with you. I just wanted to say that I'm entering my 40th year of life here, and we have got to continue to welcome, introduce, fold in, support the interest of our young people. Many of our young people, especially in Pawnee, are familiar with programs or concepts like the 4-H program or farmers extension programs, but not many of us really understand the origin of where that kind of came from. And so I currently study public policy and have immersed myself in understanding the foundation of the US Department of Agriculture, and how that structural integration contributed to colonization and impact of our agricultural food systems. So what I try to do today is take on a always learning, always a student, and as I grow in the field, mentorship role. And I'm proud to say that our Pawnee Seed Preservation Project basically has grown from the concept of representation in contemporary society and representation in our homelands, which are based in Nebraska along the Platte Loop and Republic Rivers. And so we live in Oklahoma today, but in the 1870s, after much service, dedication to the US government through protection of railroad expansion. It's hard to swallow that sometimes, but it's part of our history. And we were chosen as scouts to protect some of the expansion. And so that's a little bit of the history and knowledge that we have to kind of accept. But we also know that we are fluid, and we are able to change, shift, and adapt. And so it's really beautiful that this particular Seed Preservation Society movement is women-led. I would like to acknowledge that right now at home, or at least the previous 5 days up till yesterday, at home at the Pawnee Nation in Oklahoma, we have a group of Pawnee community members and elders and teens who are volunteering their time to build an earth lodge. And Earth Lodge was our home that we lived in up in Nebraska, a little bit down here in Oklahoma at the very beginning of our time here, our occupation here. But it's beautiful because the Earth Lodge is so symbolic. And like I read earlier about my great relative there, the lodge is not just that singular home. You know, that lodge is not just those maybe 40 family members who lived in that home, but it includes what Olivia was saying about the relationship between the land, the water, the air, the sky, the food, the fiber, the forestry. Like all those things go into building your earth lodge. And then there's the communion of the materials, you know, gathering those, which they did at home with the cedar and some cottonwoods and other trees that we consider relatives and a blessing. And so as we build and rebuild what it is that food sovereignty is, we know that part of that was our food caches of the earth lodge, our drying racks, even down to how we would bury our relatives, you know, and all those things were intrinsically tied to food, fiber, and forestry. And so I just try to keep those things in mind. And one of the most beautiful things that I think rematriation does is that it is heart work, to borrow terminology that was coined by Dr. Robin Williams. She's an education expert that's Kiowa, but she basically says, you know, heart work is the passion, interest, cultural connections, the knowledge that we have established, and the development of future knowledge with the cultural and natural resource expansion at heart. So we know we've had a chance to build out these things, but then again, with USDA and Farm Service barriers in the past, it's time for a renewed chance at some of that social equity, renewed chance at building relationships, and redesigning some of these programs that no longer serve us, or these functions or policies that no longer serve us. And I'm going to hand it back to Olivia, but I just wanted to acknowledge that Mother Corn, she's part of our creation story with the Pawnee people. And I read just this morning that I love the work and the children that we bring into the work, and the youth that we bring into the work, and the community members that we bring into the work. They feel it in their heart. They know it. They love it. Even if it's been a while since we're doing it and practicing it. And I was reading that Mother Corn, one of her assets, her values, her strengths, her superpowers is that she protects us near the heart. And so she had a special place near our heart. And we can't forget that as we move forward and develop and grow, especially in these challenging times, and especially after much grief and mourning and collective loss, as Jasha mentioned. We do have strengths, and they come in the form of our corn and our bison relatives, and our relationship to the land that is unique and not in dominion over earth. So.
Edie, thank you to you both for offering, just that little bit of yourselves, and, expanding on your introduction and your work. And it's so, like, I don't know, like I'm like lifted, right? Like I'm kind of like, caught up right here, elected in my chick stew, because I've wanted, honestly, to find a way to, bring you together. And I just so grateful for this opportunity during this, action camp, this event, to be able to connect you two, because I so have admired the work of y'all in particular. So many of us have an inherent calling, those prayers, that inherent prayer that was laid for us in particular from those ancestors that we descend from. And as you both know, for those that are not aware in the room, I'm a first food sovereignty advocate. That would be human milk, lactation, breast, chest milk. And so that's, in some ways I have been connected to you through that work, as well as, being a volunteer here and there for, the last 8 or so years with the Seed Society here in Pawnee. And So anyway, I just wanted to, you know, kind of go back to the fact that like y'all are talking about rematriation or talking about, you know, um, the humanity, if you will, of our food, of our food systems. And so I wonder if you could maybe both expand on um, helping connect this to how people look at resistance work. You know, like how is what y'all doing frontlines work, if you will.
Can I chip in here, Olivia? And then I'll
Yeah,
hand off to you pretty
please.
quick. I just wanted to give an example that I think would inspire us all to shift this paradigm on its head and keep moving forward with our momentum. I was reading recently about this, these models already in place. So the cooperative extension and the different programs that exist were founded on the concept of colonization. They were founded on the concept of expansion. But one of the things I never realized until reading a report from the Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative and the Native American Ag Fund and their research team, one thing I didn't wrap my head around, because I think of it as, well, we don't need to consider our plant medicines and our crops and these different things, our protected animal species. We don't need to consider them a resource. And that was one of my mentee and interns really planted that seed in my head of, if you plant it as a resource, then it can be taken away. And so framing it as an act of resistance and being aware that some of the earliest encounters between our Indigenous people here and the colonizers from other nations, that just that unique ag and subsistence knowledge, the plant medicine knowledge, the practices, the connection with the spirit, our spirituality, all of those things were utilized against us and as trade, as what we call de facto currency. So early on with the contact, there was currency established around that knowledge. And if someone could establish that dominance you mentioned earlier, Olivia, then they had a foot ahead, a leg ahead of where we were, and they could control some of this land expansion. They could control these things. And so we know that our traditional knowledge systems and traditional ecological knowledge and practices were a threat to the European nations, and they were a threat, you know, no matter what Thanksgiving story we're told over and over again in our educational institutions, we have been and always will be a threat due to these gifts that we've been blessed with. And so that is a corner that we have in our resistance. And then having that knowledge of that, how these things developed over time, and then rooting ourselves. Sandy Whitehawk, she had worked in like Indian child welfare, you know, knowledge and understanding how boarding schools impacted our people. I heard her speak at the NICWA conference one year in Alaska, and she just blew me away. I was sitting there taking notes for her, and I was crying and just like, you know, snapping. But what she said that blew me away the most was that whenever the boarding schools and these foods that were not familiar to us were introduced to us, it took away our ability to regulate ourselves. And going back to that heart, what is the first thing that our infants, our little beings, what's that first thing they hear? What's home to them? That's our heart. And so our natural cycles of the day, prayer, planting, all those things, they were impacted. Our hearts were broken. We can piece those things back together, and we can acknowledge the loss, but we also have to remember that at our core, we have these really strong hearts that will continue to lead us into the future.
Winnie, thank you for that. That's beautiful. And it connected so directly to like my first imagery when I think about this work, or not just think about it, it's like these I'm thinking about these moments when I have this very visceral, like deep understanding of this resistance, is when we're out like harvesting and gathering, when we're eating, when we're nourishing ourselves. And I recently learned that, so a really important food here is called a ground nut. It's like a kind of like a little potato tuber that grows under the ground. And so ground nuts, and they were, you know, one of the foods that we helped the early colonists like learn and to know and right. And so they came to it, it was one of the foods that first like helped them to subsist here. And there, when it was still the colony, I had I had them too. I would love to, like, I'd be really curious what those look like for you all and how you prepare them too. But so that when it was still English colony, that they had a law on the books that it was illegal for Indians to dig up the ground nuts, right? That we could be imprisoned for that specific food source. You know, a specific law was needed to disrupt that relationship, right? And to try to exert that control, because they understood, you know, they understood how important and how freeing it is to be able to feed yourself, right? And to know the land and to have a relationship in a way where your needs are met through those relationships. You don't need any kind, there's no space for dependency there, right? And to be manipulated with those who aren't entering that relationship in a good way. So they knew really quickly the power of food systems, right? And if we want to think about our food systems now, like the only reason that there is hunger is because hunger has been designed into the system. It's not an accident. That's what all of the harms that we're experiencing really in society are the way these structures have been designed to enact harm. So they understood the impact of our food systems. So when I'm, you know, this winter, I've been so fortunate to have been gifted moose from a couple relatives, and I myself am chest feeding, and so eating lots of foods like from the land here that we've gathered through the year through our relationships with other indigenous food producers, and when I'm feeding like my baby and like having it feels and right. So just how important in healing that is, because I also know like my own experience, like I didn't grow up this wasn't my experience growing up, right? Like this isn't what I've always known in my body, right? Like I do know, but like my body has not always been nourished. There was a disruption there, and it feels very privileged. I do feel privileged, but I fight hard, right? We're fighting hard for this too, to be able to give something different for ourselves now and for future generations. And like my kids and the kids like in the collective, like they're gonna always know these things, right? They don't need to, so there'll be less that they need to reclaim, and that feels so empowering. When you can feed yourself and you can know your relatives around you and the lessons that they teach, that's the foundation for all of this other transformational work, right? So much of all of these areas of resistance and organizing, it really comes down to relationships, right? Like all of this work is about relationships. And I mean, for me, I don't know, there's no better teacher, there's no humbler, gentler, and sometimes not gentle when I need that teacher is like the earth, right? And for whatever reason, I can, maybe because of so many interpersonal harms, I can have more barriers. So sometimes learning from other humans that have a lot to teach me, but maybe I don't know, I feel like I'm able to allow vulnerability with the earth and all of the many, many teachers of the earth that can help me learn things in ways that are gentler, and then I can, you know, and like kind of translate it for my human relatives. So resistance, yeah, like how we feed ourselves and how we relate to the world, the earth, right? And that is the basis of all of it.
I just want to acknowledge too. Sorry, Jasha.
No, go ahead. Go.
Just to acknowledge one of our aunties, our grandmothers in the movement. Of course, you know, Casey Camp's work and how she tells us to keep a strong heart, you know, a strong mind, and to know that we're in unity and you know, in that work. And so one thing that I know that they have done up in our Nebraska homelands as Ponca people is, plant corn in the pathway of the XXL pipeline, and asserting and recognizing the rights of nature. And so how can we uphold and support those things? Like you said, we're very vulnerable in our quiet times and reflection times and planting times. We gather strength from those times. We gather strength from those relationships, building those relationships, healing those relationships. And I just am in total agreement with you. And there are examples and models of resistance that we can look to. And there also is just so much innovation in our youth, because they carry that ancestral knowledge and they're that much closer to the stars. So I think it's so important to lean into their knowledge and have them feel welcome and supported. Even if we're all stumbling and kind of figuring out how do we do this, I think that they have an innate knowledge sense that I'm very grateful to be close to.
Yes, and if I could add another piece that feels really important to moving towards food and sovereignty for all people, right? Like when Indigenous people achieve food sovereignty, everyone around them will be fed, right? Everyone will be fed. But so, another piece of the resistance of this, and it's embedded in how we organize as the collective, is that we're really, so yes, so I support a lot of the projects that are in Wabanaki territory, but we extend across all tribal nations. We don't have representation right now, but we welcome and we want engagement in all tribal nations in the Northeast. And really, I mean, a lot of us are really isolated in our work. We're heavy lifters in our communities doing a lot, and it's been really empowering reaching across our communities to have that support and to develop really deep kinship, but also knowledge exchange and labor exchange and resources and relationships. But again, it is the resistance and the transformation in that comes from, again, those relationships, right? Restoring those. Think of how powerful our political relationships, our social kin relationships, our economic and our trade routes, right? In order to achieve food sovereignty, we need to be engaged in trading with our neighbors near and far. That's how so many of our different seed and plant relatives got to us. They were kept and cared, taken by other communities and traded into our communities, right, across all of Turtle Island. So really being really intentional about connecting and really working in solidarity and community with one another, and really learning one another's struggle, so we know how to show up, so we know what's going on, and how when something comes our way that can be supportive of our relatives, we know how to make that connection. So it is absolutely transformational to again, we're hyper local, we're in our tribal communities, doing this work. We're not even Native people go into anybody else's community and bringing a program or anything. We're supporting the leaders in communities, but we are always in communication with one another. We're respecting the the vision and what that community identifies as a priority, but we're first in line to all hands on deck with whatever a project is, or to share resources really as radically as we can. Anyways, I just think that piece of thinking about food sovereignty as a network of interdependence, again, moving away from our individual as a single, I don't even believe that, but a single body, right, as an individual, that it's not food sovereignty for an individual, and it's also not possible for an individual tribe or nation to achieve food sovereignty. I mean, you need the well-being of all of your relatives, native and non-native relatives around you. So
Thank you for y'all's responses. I was really so struck by just what both of you have again been sharing. I think I can't remember exactly at who, because I feel like you both have kind of really complemented each other, but just that relationship to the land, right? That part of rematriation, that part of this work of food sovereignty is that reclamation of that relationship that we have with the land that, you know, might not be as upfront or as abundant as it once was, but it's not gone. Like, it's still here. And just the hope that comes with these descendants, you know, from, you know, that are coming up and still to come. But that's how y'all's acts of resistance in this particular work is keeping that connective tissue that we have, not just to the land but with each other. I was really kind of thinking about you know, braiding sweetgrass and how Robin spoke to that relationship, and we're very baby, like young, like babies, right, in relationship to the history of this land, of the planet. And really, we do have to continue to look to those elder species, to those elder plants and animal beings as the original teachers, in terms of how we kind of operate and move in the world. And that's something that's not that in has been so greatly disrupted. That was the intent and design in the land theft, in a lot of the harm and the disruption that came from settlers and you know, the ongoing colonization, right? And so I just, you know, y'all are really badass, and I appreciate that, Electa, that you were able to raise up, you know, in terms of policy, because like yourself, you know, very much interested in that particular field of work, because that is in its own right, it's resistance work. But the Ponca rights of nature, I think they were like the first nation to initiate that, in terms of trying to give rights to the land, to the nature, in order to prevent some of this environmental desecration. And I know that you mentioned in our conversation ahead of this session that you might touch on policy. So is there something in particular that you have that you could share? Maybe that's a little digestible for, you know, the masses who aren't so nerdy like us. And not that you're not nerdy if you don't like policy, but, you know, some of us are so very like, about it.
Sure. So we have another intern. She's at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Her name is Kahita, and she is just so driven, so talented. When she joined our team, she's always been Pawnee, but when she joined our team, she brought this, like you said, childlike understanding of her relation to the food system. So I interviewed her and Mikai Clark, our other intern at the time, at our homelands in Nebraska at a farmhouse where in the past decades, you know, GMO corn is grown, or corn that is not necessarily considered agricultural. Strengths. And so I asked her, as she came onto the seed preservation project, what her relationship was to our food system, or what is a food system, you know, really breaking it down to the basics. And her response at that time in 2017 or 2018 was, well, I eat. And that helped me really understand where she was coming from. The ability to build capacity or understanding and knowledge and practice in that particular individual, and that it comes from something much greater than us, and that's another way for her to feel connected. And so just this conversation right here is a way for us to feel a little more connected in the resistance. But policy-wise, I'll just give an example. At the federal level here in the US, every 5 years or so, there is what we call a Omnibus Legislation. It takes care of a lot of things. And so it has different titles. It has 12 different titles to it. And our issues and our strengths and our challenges at the community level can impact that federal conversation, that state conversation, that regional trading that Olivia was mentioning, like those things and the gaps and the barriers to having a thriving food system can almost be covered in the titles of the Farm Bill. So if you follow Twitter or do social media or anything like that, there is a Farm Bill Coalition, and I'll put it in the chat, but it's Native Advocate, at Native Advocate. See if I can spell. Let's see. And basically you can learn more about these regional tribal community producer roundtables. So even the definition of a tribal food producer or a food producer in general is established on that de facto currency of how much you make per year, how much income you generate per year. But we know from our home communities and the work that we do, it's much more than that. You know, we harvest together. We don't necessarily isolate all the rewards into one single tax document because it serves our whole community. And that's ideally what we should be doing. But with the way that is the USDA and the tax system are set up now, you have to go through so many hoops to be able to be considered a producer. And then once you're a producer, you know, it seems like you have that more of a voice or an outlet for sharing your needs. So I would say, you know, one of the basic things we can do is going to our school systems or going to looking at our food distribution programs, which have existed for decades and have caused much harm. Those people that work there, we're not against them, but we want to educate them, inform them, and involve them in the shift in the system. And so resistance doesn't have to be like it can be that nonviolent approach. It can be that commonality approach that you're all part of the same food system. You're all part of those finite resources or accesses to water. You know, they say water resources, but basically, you know, with climate change, there's a lot of things that we're going to be facing. And so we have to be innovative, creative, and ready to work together in an entirely new way. And so I can share in the chat the 12 titles to the Farm Bill, and then you can kind of see where you align, whether it be studies, practical experience, or passion, you know, these different things, these connections that you can get involved in these conversations. And not everything occurs at the federal level. Many things occur that make great impact at the local level, but this is just one vehicle of legislation that impacts very many of us. It impacts the vendors we're able to procure foods from for our children's schools. Impacts supplemental nutrition assistance programming, and it impacts the way that conservation policies are written at the tribal, state, federal level. So it's just something to start wrapping our head around. And I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't been invited to a youth camp and then just like opened my eyes to some of the experiences that other tribal nations and Indigenous youth were facing. So I'll just put that in the chat, and Olivia, you're welcome to pick up the stick.
I was just like listening and like thinking about all the things I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so much I need to research. So I was like, I was deep into thinking about what you're talking about. I'm like, I need to email her after and see if she'll talk with me. So I'm just thinking, I'm reflecting on that right now. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that so greatly. Like, you know, in terms of how the different ways that, you know, we can participate in these various subjects, if you will. It's really hard because like to piece everything out, you know, is just it's difficult. But you know, where you all see the role that you've had to, you know, that you've been entrusted with, right? Like I couldn't know anybody else but Electa to help with our seeds specifically, just like Olivia. I'm sure that that's what you carry on in your community. And so I guess my last question here, and if you all in, attending here have any questions for these folks here, please use the chat. Go ahead and drop your question in the chat. But what advice or what thought could you give to even having some of these folks here maybe not necessarily get directly involved with food sovereignty, maybe they don't have access to land, I mean, because that's, it's there's been so many barriers to disrupt, our way of getting involved, even at the local level, right? But even maybe just finding your way to this role, like what is it that, maybe helped you kind of place you where you are, and how did you hear that? I hope that was clear in my question.
Yeah, my mind goes to thinking from this lens of rematriation and recognizing that everyone has gifts, right? And everyone has these special offerings to contribute back to community. And so thinking through a lens of food sovereignty work, even if we're thinking, like I'm thinking about like some of the things in the terms of like the movement of the collective where we could really be strengthened is around like communications or graphic artistry, right? And like this lens that Electa is speaking to around policy and all of the different levels, right? And being engaged in those processes. And there's in like writing, right? Like, so to communicate through writing or grant writing, there's so many pieces of like of this work. And so yeah, I mean, so there's so many different roles that folks can play near and far, right? And that's kind of a strength of this strange time that we're in, is that we can be in our different territories and sit in the conversation. So the same can be said for people sharing their various skills. I mean, I always encourage folks as much as possible to get connected where you are on the land, where you are with local relatives, whether it's Indigenous, whether it's other Black, Brown, marginalized historically, marginalized communities where you are, really builds deep relationships there. But it can't, it can't, if you're not sure how to get connected, reach out somewhere, and people can help, especially in, in Indian country. Well, we can help connect you to local relatives. But I'd be curious if there are folks who, like in this conversation, who have like wonderings about how to get connected or to deepen their food systems work.
I see a question in the chat. Is it okay if I read it, Jasha, or do you want to read it? Okay. Madeline says, hi, I'm starting a charitable NGO body that will turn lawns into a network of farms, the proceeds of which goes towards Indigenous food sovereignty. Do either of you have any recommended readings to help inform the radical philosophy or otherwise? Sorry, the question is so broad. I figured out a lot, but now I'm just tightening up the plan and rounding it out with bigger concepts. One thing I've seen at home that might tie into this, of course, is the human rights framework. And that's not to say it's perfect, but I can say that, like it's language that people will be familiar with, if they've been exposed to development or what is deemed as sustainable development. It's taken a lot of coordination and cooperation to get to that point, and it's still very skewed and slanted. And so I think that redefining, creating new words in our languages to show what a cooperative moving forward would be is very helpful, because then those words go into policy. Those words then go into structural frameworks like our own constitutions. One thing I get tripped up on, and Jasha, I went back to work for the Pawnees last year for a little while, and I'm not an attorney. I'm just, a student of life, basically. And I would see these agreements and contracts and these different things that kind of guide our governance and guide our interactions and guide those things in a legal framework. But I realized like I need to educate myself a little more on like easements and conservation, and who are the key players and stakeholders around a conservation easement, whether that be like a beach or like the waterway or farm soil and things like that. Like there's so many different people that touch those points, and if we don't understand easements, we don't understand compacts, contracts, agreements, then the language of the conqueror comes back and takes us out or puts them in another position higher than us. So we have to be able to speak their language to a degree. And so I might look at some of those agreements and compacts and see what we would want to improve in the human rights framework and sustainable development. Because then we have a broader coalition of Indigenous people across the globe. And you know what they say, where the eagle meets the condor, and kind of like aligning what we're trying to do to preserve our food systems and perpetuate them.
Yes, Electa, I would love, so around land access, land rematriation, there's been a fair amount, Shagak, sorry. I think my partner's phone is in here and I don't know how to turn it off. I don't know if others can hear it, but I would love, yeah, these are conversations I agree with others need to really, all of these legal language, like places where there's legal language, we need to resist and push back. And as much as possible, have them put everywhere in legal documents. It's unceded territory, that it's stolen, like have it put in these documents. And I'm in spaces where I'm, you know, having conversations on the development of easements, and like that's the language I'm getting in there. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm not an attorney either, but I don't know, they're listening to me and they're friggin' signing them. So I'm like, shit, I'm gonna do as much, like I don't think they even know what they're doing. And so I love it. I love it. I love it. And so but I also need to make sure that I'm being informed about, you know, what I'm really pushing and advocating in these documents, right? That like I'm pushing in ways that, yeah, so there's more for me to continue to like research, but again, you know, working with like tribal historians, working with others from my tribe who have researched these things, tribal attorney, who's my uncle, tribal member, and really, anyways, so yeah, get really creative. They are important places of resistance, and you don't know what kind of precedents you could be really setting for the future in a good way. I had another point of connection that felt important, but I lost it, so that's okay. But yeah, I think really be informed.
It's 17 hours.
Sorry.
7 o'clock, or 6 o'clock y'all time. So yeah, resistance can show up in a lot of ways, but I guess I did want to just drop the name, Dr. Kim Tallbear, responding to the question, Madeline, their work around relationality has been really like helpful and supportive, and I could see that very much connecting to the rights of nature also. But anyways, you know, some of their work has been really helpful in my food systems work, and really they're talking about relationships and our kin networks, kin systems. And
I don't know what that's. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, some window popped up, but yeah, I appreciate that and appreciate that question. Madeline, I'm so sorry, I can't remember how you pronounce your name, but they've been in these sessions like throughout and very engaged, and it's good to see how you're, you know, like the actions you are taking in your community. So appreciate that. And so I guess I will we can move on to, I just have like 2 more questions, and they might be like unrelated but kind of related. So first question I want to know, because sometimes, you know, when we get in our very specific like subject matter that we just love, we're so passionate about, and it's so deep, and honestly, like all of this, you know, like resistance work is really heavy and can be really taxing and wearing on the soul. And so I want to know, like, when what's giving you joy right now, and or gives you life. And the second question is, how can we support your work?
So I'll go so Electa can have the last word. Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, holding that. So no, but what's bringing me, so the first thing I picture my two little ones. So I have a 3-month-old and a 5-year-old, and they, like, when they engage and like make each other laugh, oh, it's just like it is amazing. So that definitely like brings me joy and kind of eases some of my like climate crisis anxiety that I have. So yeah, being with my little ones. Oh, there's a second part to the question. I think there's a second part and it danced out of my head. Oh, and how can
can we
others,
support your work? Yeah.
right. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with it is like, invest of your soul, your spirit, like your heart, as much as you can where you are, to support food sovereignty work, right? Again, when thinking about this as a network, like in order to really like resist the colonial, I don't know, all the things, colonial occupation, agro industry, imperialism, like we really need, we need like people on the earth, with the earth, in community, resisting as many places as possible, and that is supportive for all of our liberation, right? So it would be great if there's like someone, especially if there's someone in here that's like in the Northeast, and wanted to connect period, to strengthen work, but around communications, like I said, graphic, like those are things of like weakness for sure for our organization. But more than anything, just don't hesitate to, like, we don't have time to waste. Just really give as much of yourself, like, to the local communities, the local earth where you are, and it does all of us a great benefit in our future generations. So
Thank you. My heart feels really full too, Jasha, and also Olivia. I think something that has brought me joy, because I just love being outside anyway. Like, it's wild to imagine me ever being behind a desk pushing policy when I could be outside making the connection between those plant medicines and youth learning about that those things are right here in our ecology. That's where I love to be and what gives me joy. And then going back to the groundnut conversation that we had earlier. So our river, the Loup River in Nebraska, I have learned through reading books about that framed us as dependent, a dependence of the food system, dependence of us as Pawnee people. Like, those plants and plant medicines and plant relatives, I have learned how also grow in Pawnee, where we were relocated to. They grow along the marshy shores, the Apios americana, the American groundnut, and it is actually a sweet pea on the top kind of plant, and it's a beautiful flower. And then, like she said, it's a tuber, so it's a potato at its base. But the Loup River, we used to call it mini potatoes. And I think that, today Pawnee people love and always enjoy a potato, or we eat a potato at all our doings. And so, but we need to continue that knowledge circulation, that our potatoes were different, they were strong, they had different nutrient values, and they also grew. It took 2 years for them to fully develop into like their full fruit. And so they were delicate, and we needed to nurture and protect those as well to ensure that they made it to their full growth, and we harvested them in the correct protocol, or that they would return to us, with prayer and with prayer and with intention as we harvested. So those are the things that kind of fill me up, is that those knowledges and those plants are already close to us and near to us. And we just kind of have to ask for that knowledge again and acknowledge its power. And I think that is what continues to drive me. There's so much we don't know. and there's so much that we've forgotten, but when we have conversations like this, it propels us to learn more, to share more, and to be more protective and conscientious of how we utilize our medicines.
So thank you.
Oh yeah, you can support,
Yeah.
they should put it in the chat, but you can support Pawnee Seed Preservation Society. You can also send us examples of cooperative agreements between farmer to farmer, or cooperative agreements for how to reintroduce maybe bison or these different relatives into checkerboarded communities. You know, how do you have those conversations with non-native people, with neighbors, with relatives, about why those animals bring a significant return spiritually, culturally, and also nutritionally.
No, Edie, Mado, thank you so much. Yeah, just like so much here between y'all, elder millennials, if you will, you know, junior aunties, as I was told, junior uncles, if you will. Appreciate, yeah, your time with us. I appreciate this space that, you know, you were able to help cultivate and inform folks, or help support folks, or affirm folks, because I found this to be really affirming. It was very, very good to see you all. I miss having been able to, you know, see you in person. You know, Olivia, I tried to connect with you a year ago, and we'll get there. And I'm so happy, you know, that you're safe and well after having, you know, your little one, your latest little one. And then Electa, just glad that you have been able to travel safely to where you're at right now. Tiwachitik's Odie is good. And yeah, I just appreciate so much of y'all's whole world right now. And so with that, like, yeah, we're concluded, but we did have a giveaway that we do promise to get out, and the winner that we drew was, now forgive me for if I mispronounced your name, but I have, is it Kaya Turner, KYHA? You are the winner of the gift bag giveaway. Hello. Yeah, you got it. Direct message us, if you will, your shipping address on this chat here. You can, you know, direct message to the IP3 admin, and then just send us your shipping address, and we'll get it out to you sometime next week. So yeah, thank you for attending. And I just, again, thank you to those of you who were in the audience here on Zoom, and anybody who was on the Facebook there. We are continuing SKODOODISDEN Action Camp for the rest of the week. We have sessions beginning tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central. We actually are doing SKODOODISDEN talks with the homies on our Instagram at IP3 Action. We will be visiting with a member of the Love the Everglades movement, Reverend Houston Cypress. Houston's been in attendance throughout this week as well, having great insight and offerings throughout some of these sessions as well. And then we will have another live panel like this, Black Indigenous Liberation, which will actually be moderated by Amber Starks, who is largely known as Melanin Muskogee, and panelists will include Seisha Primo Shaw and Ian McCants. Some relatives as well of mine that I'm looking forward to getting to see and visit with again. So it's been great visiting with y'all. Appreciate y'all's attendance. Stay safe, stay warm. We'll see you later.
So